Hey, what's up, everybody? KJ Fatu here. I want to talk to you guys about a brand new thing that I'm doing here on my YouTube channel, or all my social media, which is called Song Saturday. And I figured, what a better thing to do as an artist, as a musician, as a MC, as a hip hop artist, is talk about music. So, if you got a question or a comment, please drop it right here. Make sure to hit like, subscribe, all that blah 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 stuff. But I want to talk to you guys about a track that's really been speaking to me quite a bit at this point in my life. Uh, and it's interesting. It's interesting anytime you you connect with someone's music from people that you know, because other people just kind of connect with music in a way that's, I don't want to say superfluous, but it has to do with, right song at the right time. Boom. You may never meet that person. You may never know the backstory. You may never understand their perspective. You may interpret lyrics in a certain way. It's weirder for me when you know the artist that made the song and you've kind of watched their career at all different stages. And so I'll just dive right in. Um, so I just preface this by saying, like, I'm not like super tight with NF or Nate. I mean, we've definitely hung out on many occasions, um, going back almost, I don't know, 12 years, maybe something like that, maybe even longer than that. Um, but there is a really interesting thing parallel between my life and his, is that he grew up in a place in Michigan called Gladwin, which, if you know anything about Michigan, it's shaped like a glove. So anybody that's from Michigan or spent time in Michigan, if you meet another person from Michigan, you usually go, "Oh, where are you from?" And that's like the universal sign that you're from Michigan. You're like, "Where on the oven mitt are you from?" Right? Where on the giant glove of America are you from? And so that's kind of like the easy way that you can let people know where you're at. And so if someone says, "Oh, I'm from Michigan," I go, "Where are you from?" Okay, they'll usually tell you where they are in the glove, and I always point to up here, which is a place in northern Michigan called Higgins Lake. Higgins Lake is just a bit north of a place called Houghton Lake. And there's a little island out in the middle of Higgins Lake that I started going up to when I was very young. In fact, my grandfather purchased the island way back in the day, and sold off plots of land, and we always kept a cabin up there. So, like, growing up in between, like inner city Tampa and then suburban Palm Harbor and like Miami, um, over the summers for several years, actually for quite a while, I made this summertime escape up to Higgins Lake, where I would camp out, live on this island with my cousin and my grandma and other people that were around the lake or on the lake. I'm giving you way too much backstory, but that's what I do. That being said, growing up in that area, like, you start to understand the culture of like North Michigan and the culture of Michigan and the culture of like small town Michigan. And that, like, I had three existences in my life. I had inner city Tampa, which is like the hood. I had Palm Harbor, which is like super affluent suburban. And then I had very rural, which was like Higgins Lake. Um, anyway, so years back, I think it was almost 12 years ago, I played a festival called Unity Festival. No, Big Ticket Festival up in Gaylord, Michigan, which again is like up here. And right before I went on, I headlined one of the stages, along with my man George Moss on stage and my band. And before I went on, there was a guy who opened, and his name was, at that time, Nathan Furstein. I'm probably sorry if I'm messing up his last name. He was going by Nathan Fairstein, not NF. And I had heard about him because he was signed to a label that my friend had been helping run, along with, I knew a bunch of people on the label. It was a label called Exist. So I kind of knew about him, but I never met him. And I just remember when he was going on opening, I just remember this. I'm just gonna be honest with you. My impression of his music was, it was very like intense and kind of angry. And this was in like the middle of the day, and he didn't have a really big crowd. He was just kind of one of the openers. And to just hear, like, at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and be honest with you, like, when I'm in Michigan, like, that's my happy place, right? Like, everything about Michigan brings me joy because it reminds me of my childhood summers. And to hear this, like, very intense young white kid, like, really kind of angrily, intensely rapping about, I didn't catch a lot of his subject matter, but it was just very like it just I remember there's two things. One, I remember like thinking like this really is intense and like angry. And two, it's really odd to kind of take this on like this beautiful, gorgeous Michigan day at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So I didn't blow it off. I just, what I mean, like when you're in show mode and I'm setting things up and like that's a really good festival I used to play. I'm like half listening and half distracted at the same time. And all that to be said, he did his thing, and then we knew somebody mutual who was by the name of George Moss, who was my hype man at the time, and still is my good homie. Um, Later on that day, I think it was right after I got done performing, and we were eating. We were in like the little eating section, and he was sitting across from me, and he was with a girl, which I'm definitely sure is not his wife now. I think again, this was a long time ago, and I just remember he was kind of like we had a good conversation. It was chill. I just remember my impression of him was he just seemed young, right? Kind of like that kind of young 18, 19-year-old kind of energy vibe. And I just remember thinking like, dang, if I get compared to Eminem, this dude is definitely going to get compared to Eminem. Like if people say I'm the save Slim Shady, which I had fought really hard to get away from, I'm like, this guy is definitely like, he's definitely going to wear that badge. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't mean that in a bad way or good way. I'm just saying I know how the industry works. And so fast forward a couple years, he was out on a tour with my drummer for a while, and then it would just kind of be. Then we started actually like passing quite a bit. I would play this festival I would play this camp called Camp Electric, which is Toby Mac's music camp, and he opened up at one point, and it was just him and a drummer. And again, it was like that intense, like you understand, like I came up in the Christian music industry where like raw energy, anger, emotion was not really embraced in hip hop, in Christian rap, like in the Christian music industry. Everything was like conditioned to be like happy and like make people feel good and don't embrace anger and like, you know what I'm saying? Like you were kind of in the industry, you were kind of told to like stay away from that, right? You were kind of told to stay away and be like, make everybody feel happy, make them laugh. I mean, listen, like I have the heartbeat of an MC, of a hip hop artist. And no matter what I ever did, it was like, it always kind of came back to the goofy songs. Like those were like the goofy, like, and I don't do like one song and that would be like this defining thing. So I'm kind of like, I would start to get this impression like, man, people just want fluff, and I'm like, how's this guy's music going to translate to an industry where fluff is like sort of celebrated, and this everything about his music was intensely serious. And I just remember sitting back and thinking, I wonder if this will work. But that was kind of where we got to know each other better. Like that's like you're backstage with somebody and you just get to know them. And as this happened over the next couple of years, I want to say same show. I actually once I found out that he was from Gladwin, which is 45 minutes away from where I used to stay in Higgins Lake. Once I understood like that connection, that North Michigan connection, all of a sudden I kind of had a better understanding of where his music came from, because those North Michigan towns, they're kind of like vacation towns in the summer. People go up there to like bring out the boats, or so they have these big influx of like tourists, I should say. And then the rest of the year, it's just cold. It's freezing cold. Like these towns, the other side of some of these towns is you have lower income people that are struggling with, I'll just say it, abuse, drugs, abandonment, depression, anxiety. Like that's the side of those towns that you don't really see. So once I understood that that's kind of where he came from, I started to understand why that would create somebody who has, angst or frustration or deals with, these intense emotions. And, because Michigan is Michigan, obviously the place of, Eminem, who has multiple facets. Eminem has like the goofy side, he has the serious side, and then he has the angry side. Like, I understood why lower income, you know, white folk, that's the best way I'll just say it, why they would embrace Eminem's music, because a lot of what people don't really understand about music and hip hop is that a lot of it is the byproduct of the place you're from, right? Um, whether that's the economic issues you deal with, the emotional issues you deal with, the depression issues, whatever. Like, the music is usually shaped by that. So now I understand why that appeals to people from Michigan or anywhere for that matter. But the point what I'm getting at, here's what I'm going to get at, is that once I understood that connection, I actually felt the connection to NF. I was like, man, dude, like, we're kind of from the same area. We're obviously years apart in age, but like, I get it. I know what it's like to live in a small Michigan town with like one stoplight. You know what I mean? But I've never had to live there all year round. And that's when I began to kind of understand the backstory on a lot of his music, and that's what forms someone's music. Like, that's what forms like where they're from spiritually, emotionally, mentally. So I'll never forget it. This was a couple years back, and I was backstage with him again. And this was probably the time where I started to really like connect with him. I was like, hey man, like, how are you doing? This is like the pastoral side of me, maybe, I guess you want to say, like, how are you doing spiritually? Are you in a church? Are you growing in God? I was kind of saying those type of questions, like, hey dude, I'd love to just pray for you for the next 30 days and just send you some encouragement. And I got his number, and we actually, of all places, we went to go to Whole Foods to eat for lunch that day, because most hip hop artists I knew at the time did not eat healthy. And Nate was like, yeah, man, I run 6 miles a day, and like, I try to eat clean. And I'm like, me too. I was like, dude, let's go to Whole Foods. It's a weird thing to say, right? That's not two rappers sitting in a room going, hey, we should really go eat organic. But that's when, like, I probably spent a good chunk of that day with him. And then this was really on the cusp of before his mainstream side took off. And I remember him saying to me at that event that day, he said, this is going to be my last, like, Christian market show I'm going to do. He's like, after this, we're going into the mainstream, I'm going to do clubs. And he's like, I don't think they get me. What I mean? That was kind of what he was saying. At least that's what I took as an impression. He was like, they don't get me. I'm not really, you know. And I remember thinking, like, all right, man, that I've been in that world. It's a dark place. It's a tough place to maintain your walk with God. You got to have the right people around you. And I just remember thinking, like, dude, if that's what you're endeavoring to do, I would love to, just as a brother in Christ, just to pray for you and reach out to you and check in with you. And that's kind of what I did for the next 30 days. I would text him and send him scripture or tell him I was praying for him and blah, blah, blah. And then kind of after that, it just sort of faded. Like, I didn't really hear back from him again. And this was like right when that first song really hit, the Let You Down, when that song came out, and that just went through the roof. And I remember just the controversy behind him. Like, people were like, well, he's not really a Christian rapper anymore, or, he's this. And I remember seeing all this happen. And I remember kind of thinking, like, what an interesting thing to watch somebody go through. And at the time, I was filling in as a youth pastor for about 6 months. And one of the nights, we took a song and we broke it down. And I used that song, Let You Down. And I'm telling you, that song rocked these about 150 kids in the room that I had, because I used it as like a jump off point to talk about what it feels like when you feel like you've let people down, or, when you're disconnected from your family unit, or like, and that's when I realized, I was like, dude, there is a niche that NF's music is hitting that is an underserved area. And that's when I understood, like, this is, I didn't know how big he'd get, but I just remember thinking, like, this is connecting with something bigger than Christian music, bigger than Christian hip hop. And I was at that point, like, going, I wonder what's going to happen. And honestly, since that day, or that's around that time, I've not talked to him since then. He's not, we don't run the same circles. He's not responding to my text, blah, blah, blah. I'm just telling you that I want to be clear. I don't have this ongoing relationship with NF. I'm just saying, for that brief period of time, to watch somebody just go through the stratosphere like that was crazy to see. All that to be said, that brings me to the song that I wanted to play. Actually, I don't even know if I can play it. Hopefully, if I play it, I won't get a copyright strike. But it's the song "Happy." In fact, if you don't know it, in fact, I'm not going to even try. I'm not going to try and play it because um, I think if I do that, if I play this song, I'm going to need a copyright strike or I'm going to get this pulled. So I'm going to read the lyrics because I think that's where this song is really like connected with me. Uh, I thought this was really interesting too because for someone that's known for dark music or angsty music, um, to have a song called "Happy" and then all of a sudden, like the color schemes have changed that he's doing now. Um, but he talks about, dear God, please hear me out. I know it's been a couple years since I reached out and said hello. I bet you wondering. I'm not even going to try to sing this. I'm in the completely wrong key. But he says, I bet you're wondering why I keep obsessing and stressing on all the little things when I should be living life and soaking up the memories. And just to be transparent with you guys, for the last almost a year, for the first time in my life, I've actually been going to see a therapist. And I do this every couple weeks. Actually, I'm doing it now about once a month because it forces me to do a lot more work. And it wasn't until this kind of season of my life that I didn't really realize, um, without going into it, the amount of trauma that I kind of went through, in my childhood, moving up to my middle school years to beyond. And I didn't realize, honestly, like I didn't realize how much I had kept this in or how much it had shaped me, but also at the same token, how much it was now working against me. We unfortunately had someone take their life at my church. And I thought as a pastor, we should lead the charge on mental health. Right. And so as they say, charity starts at home. And in this case, I started to see a therapist to work through some of my baggage from my childhood years up till now, just to be honest with you. And I had discussing things that I never really discussed with people, working through things that I never really worked through. And honestly, learning a lot about myself that I really didn't realize. So that's why this song has appealed to me so much. Because he says in the lyrics, he says, I know it's been a couple years since I reached out and said hello. Well, that doesn't really apply to me. Like I talk to God every day, but to say obsessing and stressing all the little things when I should be living life and soaking up the memories, like God has really impressed on my heart. Like it's time for me to like live in the present and live in the moment. And, you know, I'm making memories with my three sons right now that I can't miss. He goes on to say, I know I've been selfish. I got no excuse to give to you. It's true. I've been hanging by a thread. I don't know why I feel more comfortable. And this is the hook. He says, living in my agony, watching my self-esteem go up in flames, acting like I don't care what anyone else thinks, when I know truthfully that's the furthest thing I know, how I feel. But I'm too proud to open up and ask you to pick me up and pull me out of this hole that I'm trapped in. The truth is, I need help, but I can't imagine who I'd be if I was happy. And that resonated with me. That misery can love company, and that you can be in a mindset for so long that the mindset becomes your normal. You know what I mean? Like your mindset becomes like your normative way of living. And you find out that like, your trauma or your problems or your issues or your scars or your pain can be the things that make you great. That's just the reality of it is. But at the same token, it can also make you, you know, absolutely miserable at the same time. And his song goes on to say, I got some demons that I should put to rest. I got some traumas I can't forget. I got some phone calls I've been avoiding, some family members I don't connect with, some things I said that I wish I would not slip, some hurtful words shouldn't have left my lips, some bridges burn that I'm not ready to rebuild yet, some insecurities I haven't dealt with. Yes. This is the line. These two lines right here that I'm going to say next are the ones that get me every time, because this sums me up in a lot of ways. He says, I'll be the first to admit that I'm a lonely soul, the last to admit I need a hand to hold. Like, that's, you know, the funny thing is I can talk pretty freely these days about I can talk pretty freely about my past. I obviously have talked a lot about in my music. I can talk about it with people. Like I'm definitely to a place of wholeness and healing that I can talk about it. There's people that can't even talk about it. But the next line he says, I'll be the first to admit that I'm a lonely soul, but the last to um, first to admit that I'm a lonely soul, last to admit I need a hand to hold. This is the one that got me, because to say you need a hand to hold is basically to say that you need someone to guide you, you need someone to give you comfort, you need someone to um, like you're willing to admit that you're weak, you're willing to admit that like you don't have it all together, right? You're willing to admit that like to have a hand to hold is like it's almost like a childlike imagery. It's like that little kid that reaches out, for his parent to like help him across the street, or like, is scared and they reach for that hand to hold. And it's what he's juxtaposing. He's like, look, I'm so easy to say like I'm messed up, which can kind of be problematic, right? Sometimes you're like, I'm a mess, and it can be an attention thing, right? It can be like, I want people to feel bad for me, so I tell you how bad I am. But the minute someone tries to reach out and help, you're like, nah, I'm good, I can handle this. I've actually done some. Oh my gosh, I just realized what I just started doing. So anytime I've even started to catch myself. Anytime I feel like I'm being if I'm saying something that's kind of transparent, or I'm saying something that's kind of like, a little hard to deal with, I notice that I will take both of my hands and go like this on my legs. And I didn't realize it. Like that's a self-soothing. That's like a self-soothing thing. And now I've started catching myself when I do that. Right? It's like you're calming yourself down by being like, you're okay. All that to be said, first to admit I'm a lonely soul. Last to admit I need a hand to hold. And these things have driven me to my knees. These things have absolutely driven me to the place of like crying out to God. I'm actually right now, as I'm recording this, I'm on like a 2-day prayer retreat by myself, where I have been doing more listening than talking to God. And right before I left for this, one of my awesome mentors said, um, when you go on a prayer retreat, don't do all the talking. Let God speak to you, and be willing to sit in the stillness until He does. And she had shared with me a scripture where it talks about a guy by the name of Elijah, who had done all these great things for God, had all these great victories, and then flash forward a couple verses in the story, my man is hiding out in a cave, away from, after almost asking God to take his life. He's hiding out in a cave, um, and saying things like, or, I'm sorry, God says to him, why are you here, Elijah? And he kind of starts to justify himself. Well, I've done all this for you, and I'm the one left, and they're trying to kill me. And it says that God appears in the whirlwind. God appears in. I'm sorry. It says that a whirlwind comes, earthquake hits, fire comes, and it says that God was not in any of those things. That the voice of the Lord, the presence of the Lord, was not in any of those things. He asked Elijah the same question again. He says, "Why are you here, Elijah?" And again, Elijah just like qualifies himself. He's like, "I've done all this, and now they're trying to kill me." And it's how God speaks to him is in a still small voice. He says it in a still small voice. And it says that Elijah wraps his cloak around his face and he stands in God's presence, because he's finally face to face with his creator. He's finally getting what he really needed, which was FaceTime with God himself. And then God gives him all these instructions of what he's supposed to do next. And I say that because, just like that line says in the song, I'll be the first to admit I'm a lonely soul, last one to admit I need a hand to hold. Um, the hand to hold for me is obviously I need other people. I need people to help me walk through blah, blah, blah. But I also need to reach out, not just be always complaining to God about X, Y, Z. I need to be willing to like hold his hand, or I should say, let him hold my hand to guide me. You know what I mean? To be willing to be like that childlike faith. That's what scripture, Jesus talks about this. He's like, look, you got to be like a child. The song goes on to say, he goes back and he talks about the chorus again, living in my agony. And then he goes to the bridge where he talks about, he says, I don't know what's around the bend. I don't know what my future is, but I can't keep living in this agony, watching my self-esteem go up in flames, blah, blah, blah. That speaks to me. I'm at a season in my life where I don't know what's around the bend, where I don't know, exactly what my future is. But I like how NF comes to the point in the song. But I can't keep on living like this. And I think one thing, has been a criticism of NF is like all he talks about is the problem. All he talks about is the problem. He never presents the solution. I'll be honest with you. I don't know if music or art always has to do that. Right. This is something that I learned about NF's music was like sometimes music is the discussion starter. It's not necessarily supposed to have everything wrapped up in this neat little package in a 3-minute song. Like sometimes music is just there to provoke thought. It's to provoke discussion. It's to touch us in our emotions. It's to catch us unaware. Like that's one of the great things about what music can do, because it really helps us repackage and look at something in a way maybe we never looked at it. And I have found this song, I have a playlist on my Spotify, which is my worship playlist. And not all these songs like on my worship playlist are necessarily songs like How Great Thou Art. Like some of these songs, they're worship to me because they spark something in me that makes me want to cry out to God. And this is one of those songs that I put in my worship playlist because while these lyrics and the way it's put and the way it's sung and the way he raps it and the music, that's the sound bed behind it, it sparks something in me. It then drives my reaction to these songs is then to cry out to God. And I've watched, this beautiful process of how he's just continuing to bring healing in my life and continuing to bring peace in my life and calm in my life. Things that used to be high stressors for me are now becoming less and less and less and less. And so, that's one of the beautiful things about tracks like these, songs like these, just all of it from top to bottom. And so I'm really grateful for people that I know, or I should say I have known, that then turn around and make art that causes me ultimately to cry out to my creator, that are part of that like beautiful process. And I'm grateful for that. I did this like attachment. I don't know if you know anything about attachment style. Attachment style is what they talk about where like it's these sort of bonds that form when you're a kid with your caregiver. And kind of after doing one of these attachment style things, it kind of brought me to the point where it showed me that like I probably have what is called a fearful avoidant attachment style, which basically, for lack of a better term, means that like you crave attention, you crave connection, you crave, validation. But then when you get it, you like push it away because you don't know how to handle it. So that's definitely been, I've now looked back and been like, dude, of course you're going to do, be a performer, like that's a fire hose of attention. But then there are times where like when I get a compliment, I don't know how to handle it. Right. I have a overthinking mentality. And again, I'm not like one to put so much faith into, tons of psychology stuff. But the point what I'm getting at is sometimes it's kind of interesting to see yourself from that perspective. All that to be said, the beauty of music and art and lyrics and content and people that write from their heart, they kind of write things that we don't. One of the great things about what artists can do is they can say things that we can't say in a way that we can't say it because we haven't even figured out how to say it. So anyway, that's it. If you got a comment, drop it below. Love to hear about you. Love to see what you think. I want to keep going with these on Saturday. So this is Song Saturday track. Make sure you go check it out. It's by NF. It's called Happy. It's off his new album, which I think is called Happy, or it's called Hope. I think his new album is called Hope. This song is called Happy. All right. Anyway, love you guys. Pray you have a blessed Saturday. Peace out.